Hey, and welcome to the Short Stuff. I'm Josh, and there's Chuck, and Jerry's here too, and it's Short Stuff. This is a PSA episode of Short Stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We like to do those kinds of things where we tell you to stop doing something that you're doing because it's harmful and you didn't know it. So that's what we're going to do here today. And also, hat tip to my wife, Yumi, who sent me an article on this. I had no idea about this. But we're talking about nose picking. We have to kind of start off first, Chuck, by establishing a link between the nose and the brain. Go.
Sure. And this is going to relate to some particular brain diseases like Alzheimer's and generally dementia overall.
Mm-hmm.
But when those things happen, it's super sad, and that's a result of plaque building up and protein tangles in your brain that are blocking neurological pathways and gumming up the works, basically.
Yeah.
And over the years, they've kind of known for a while that, like, memory and smell are some of the first early signs. And that's no surprise, but the University of Chicago Medicine has did some very intentional research that found recently that if you have a sudden loss of smell, and generally if you're in the age range, if you're 13 and you lose your smell for something, you probably have COVID, so don't worry.
You did something wrong. You're being punished by God.
That's right. But if you have a sudden loss of smell, it can be a very good early warning sign that you might be headed down a road for dementia or Alzheimer's.
Yeah, what was interesting is the link is so strong that the a sudden loss of smell is as big a risk factor as having the literal gene that they basically say, like, this is the Alzheimer's gene, the APOE-E4 gene.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to have that gene, and if you lose your smell suddenly, you're just as likely to develop Alzheimer's shortly after.
Pretty remarkable finding.
I think so, too. So, Chuck, that was really well done. You established a link between the nose and the brain, which sets us up for the next part, which is to say there is a connection between the nose and the brain physically as well, not just neurologically. That is problematic because researchers from the Clem Jones Center for Neurobiology and Stem Cell Research in Brisbane, in Australia, found that picking your nose could actually be a risk factor for Alzheimer's as well.
That's right. And they caveat it, and we should caveat it as well, that they use mouse models to check this out, and they have definitely found that there's the introduction of a bacteria called chlamydia. I never have remembered, even though people wrote in. How do you pronounce it when it's IAE at the end?
IAE. I think it's pneumonia.
I mean, we've had very smart scientists and doctors say, guys, when you see that, it is pronounced this way, and I never can remember.
I think it is EA. I mean, if you just take the I away, A, remember Aeon Flux? That's how they spelled that. So I'm guessing it's pneumonia.
Okay, so chlamydia pneumoniae, which can be very dangerous for the brain. And this bacteria goes from the nose to the brain and kind of kicks off the production of this amyloid plaque, which is one of the plaques that can, kind of kick off Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is that once this C. pneumoniae gets into your brain or your central nervous system and you start developing this amyloid plaque, that seems like a dumb thing to do since that's going to trigger Alzheimer's. But they found antiviral and antimicrobial properties in amyloid plaque, so they think it might be part of our immune system. So
Interesting.
You don't want this bug, not just for that. Like it's been linked to a lot of other stuff too, because it's so effective at attacking our central nervous system that they think it's possible that multiple sclerosis is the result of an infection of this bug. That's pretty crazy. It exacerbates asthma. It can trigger arteriosclerosis, which apparently it makes us start absorbing LDL cholesterol, which inflames our blood vessels, which hardens them over time. All because this bug made its way into your body. So the upshot of this is that these researchers in Brisbane say, don't pick your nose because all you're doing is helping this bug get in there in the first place.
All right. I think it's a great spot for a break.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll come back and explain all that in a sec. All right, so the Australians tied this to mice. They came out and said, all right, we tested the mice. Now we need to test this on humans. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, we are really pretty sure that it's bad for humans and that you shouldn't be picking your nose because you could get some of that bacteria on your finger and basically stick it up onto a highway that goes to your brain.
Yeah.
It may already be on your hands. It may already be in your nose, in which case you'd be shoving it up there further by picking your nose.
Yeah.
And now comes the second half of this episode where we're just going to talk a little more generally about picking your nose.
Yeah, because the C. pneumoniae is not the only bug that you can push into your nose even further. The problem with that one in particular is that it attacks the central nervous system, right? But picking your nose, like you said, is not something you want to do in the first place. First of all, it's gross. You just know it's gross, but it can be dangerous too. But it also seems to be really, really widespread, Chuck.
Yeah, and I do want to point out really quickly, like the whole thing with COVID and masks. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons that they were telling people to wear masks was not just to keep from inhaling particles into your nose, but it was to keep your fingies away from your mouth and nose.
Yeah.
So you don't just like scratch your nose with a little COVID on it because it could be a carrier. So that's another reason people are saying to keep those masks on, because they found that picking your nose is literally shoving whatever bacteria you have on that index finger or thumb sometimes or pinky if it's in the little corner and getting it closer to your brain.
Right. So there was this study from 1995 out of Madison, Wisconsin, and these researchers sent 1,000 questionnaires out to people. And the questionnaires basically said, hey, we have a bunch of questions about picking your nose. You want to answer these? And 254 people responded.
Yeah, I love that.
And the response that they got was, we all do. All of us pick our noses. 91% of the people in the survey reported picking their nose. 75% said that they think everybody picks their nose.
I thought everyone kind of picked their nose occasionally.
I think they do. This study is criticized because it could very easily suffer from response bias. If you'll remember from our scientific biases episode, that was one of them, where only people who are actually interested in talking about nose picking and who are likely to pick their noses then would have been the ones who responded. So that would skew the results. But still, 91% is pretty significant.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and say it. I pick my nose here and there if I'm in a situation where it calls for it.
Oh, yeah?
Sure. If I got a boogie up there and there's no tissue at hand, just get that thing out of there. I don't think it's that gross. I mean, boogers are kind of gross looking, but it's not, it's not like picking poop out of your butt.
No, it's not at all.
Did I just say that?
You did.
Okay. For these respondents, I guess I'm one of the 254 that were like, yeah, I'll fill this thing out.
Right.
I'm a proud nose picker. For 2% of the subjects in this survey, which is not many, it actually and I think these are people who sort of obsessively pick, it actually interfered with their daily functioning. And people responded with how much time. Some people responded 15, 30 minutes. There was one person that said they spend over 2 hours a day picking their nose. And it caused various medical problems from perforation of the septum to this one lady. I think it was a different case study, but she perforated her septum and carved a hole in her sinuses from obsessively nose picking.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
No.
So these researchers concluded that nose picking is probably universal among adults at least, so it should not be considered a mental disorder alongside something like trichotillomania,
Right.
where you pull your hair out. And there's actually a name like that for nose picking, or at least compulsive nose picking, rhinotelexomania. And they said we should get rid of rhinotelexomania. It's ruined enough lives as a label, so let's just say everybody picks their nose instead.
Rhino? How did you pronounce that?
Rhinotelexomania.
I don't think that's right.
Rhinotil-XO. Yeah, it's 100% right.
Oh, well, what am I looking at then? What is rhinotrichotillomania?
Oh, so there was a documented case of somebody who compulsively picked their nose and pulled their hair.
Ah.
So they
okay.
dubbed it that.
I didn't know if it was nose hair, because getting after that nose hair can be a problem too.
Man, that stuff. Do you ever do that? Like, pull out your nose hair?
I do. It's very painful, but what I try to do is get in there with my I got some really nice hair cutting scissors.
Oh yeah.
Which is just to say they cut very well and very precisely. So I try to, because as you get older, you get hair in your nose and your ears like you never have before.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be that guy with like the crazy eyebrows and nose hair everywhere.
It just busts out all over. You turn into like a chia pet.
Basically. So I try to take care of this stuff. So I get in there with the scissors when I'm thinking about it. Now I'll trim the eyebrows and I'll trim up the nose hair. And then the ear hair, I don't want to stick scissors in there. So I'll just feel around in there and I'll pluck those. And those are pretty painful too.
You should just get one of those little buzzer things. Those work really well for nose hair and ear hair.
I used to have one of those. Oh, I went analog. It was fine.
Oh, you like analog, you hipster?
No, I mean, I literally just kind of lost it over the years and then never replaced it. But I didn't have anything against it. It was fine.
So there were some other researchers, too, that did a follow-up study in 2000 in Bangalore, India. I remember our friend Van Nostran's band was named the Bangalores.
That's right.
Yeah, just wanted to mention that. And their hypothesis was that something like nose picking, that kind of habit, finds its like origin in childhood and it just carries over into adulthood. That does not seem to be the case. Apparently, nose picking becomes much more appealing to you as you age, because only 7.6% of respondents of these teenagers who were surveyed said that they pick their nose. I'm guessing that they were given anonymity because it's a pretty self-conscious question for a teenager. But apparently it's an adult phenomenon more than a childhood phenomenon.
Yeah, I'm glad to know it was anonymous, because at first I was like, come on. I'm sure these teenagers were just like, well, I don't pick my nose.
Well, yeah, I'm guessing it was anonymous because that would have been a terrible study design if it wasn't.
Okay, I got you.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure. I'm curious about all these numbers, though. This is just a tough thing to really quantify. Any survey where you're asking people to admit doing something that may not be socially acceptable is pretty tough.
Totally. And socially acceptable is right, because depending on where you are in the world, it may or may not be frowned upon.
Yeah, I think in the U.S., if you're not egregiously just digging in there, going for gold, as I say,
yeah,
then you can get away with a quick little nose pick and just sort of do one of those, and people won't think you're like a monster.
No, they'll look the other way.
Yeah, in the cars when you always see people in traffic, I always say, "Pick a winner, buddy."
While you're honking.
I don't yell it at them. I just say it to myself.
In Japan, actually, it's not. They don't really celebrate public nose picking, but by comparison, blowing your nose in public is way worse of a social faux pas for sure. Which makes a lot of sense. It makes sense though, because they're very germ conscious in Japan. I mean, they've been wearing masks since way before the pandemic. They're old school with that stuff.
Yeah.
So I could totally see that being a big social taboo there.
Yeah, blowing your nose in public is one thing, but like in a restaurant, I'm always like, what do I do? I always feel like I should get up and excuse myself to blow my nose.
Yeah.
And I try to, unless it's kind of a you know what I'm saying? I don't want to get too gross here, but if it's like a quick little thing, it's not that big of a deal. But if it's something that sounds gross,
sure,
Like if you're really like releasing a lot of snot and you can hear that,
Oh, yeah.
then I think you should probably like excuse yourself.
That's for the bathroom.
Yeah.
And then China, apparently, I saw there's a Wall Street Journal article where the author moved to China and started picking their nose because they said that nose picking in China is, quote, a way of life.
Yeah, interesting.
But you're like, okay, that's weird, China. But apparently, the author kind of chalked it up to all of the soot that's in the air in some of the major cities there that you just have to. It's like every time we go to New York, at the end of the day, I pick my nose because I'm just getting all the crud out of there.
Yeah.
I can only imagine, visiting Beijing and of course you're going to pick your nose.
Of course.
You got anything else?
Nope. It's a way of life.
It is, Chuck. I hats off to you for admitting you pick your nose. I'll admit it too.
See, everyone picks their nose a little bit. It's no big deal.
Feels good, man. It feels good to say, I mean.
Yeah.
Also, it can feel good to pick your nose too.
Oh, yeah. That first nose blow of the morning, too, is very rewarding.
Yep. So I think Short Stuff is out, don't you?
It's got to be.
Stuff You Should Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.